Hello, my name is Ron Rocco. I'm a fellow at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
I'm Paul Bedancet. I'm the founder for the Center for Appraisal Research and Technology.
Paul and I are here today to do a tutorial on the Lincoln Institute's Vertical Equity app. The tutorial is in two parts. In this first part, we are going to introduce the concept of vertical equity and talk about some of the ways that it is measured. So Paul, what is vertical equity?
Vertical equity is a concept in property tax assessment where assessors are able to inspect that they are achieving uniform estimates of market value regardless of the price or value range of a property. So are they equitably estimating market value with respect to the lower, middle, and upper priced properties? Anytime an assessor is inspecting for uniformity, we should see sales ratios be consistent across price ranges regardless. If ratios do fluctuate across prices, this suggests that vertical inequity is present in the assessed values. And there are two primary types of vertical inequity in property tax assessment. The first is regressivity. This is where ratios are lower among higher priced properties. And the other is progressivity. This is where ratios are lower among lower priced properties. This is an example here where we have an indicator of the ratio on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis, we have price. In a perfect world, we would see not very much fluctuation as you go from the lower priced properties to the higher priced properties with regard to the ratio. But this is an example where we can see that ratios do fluctuate and then eventually trend downward as we move from these lower priced properties to higher priced properties. This suggests that valuations are not uniform or fair because valuations on the higher end, well, these people would only be paying property taxes on a lower percentage of market value, whereas folks on the lower end of the price spectrum, they would be paying taxes on full to even potentially over 100% of market value.
So you would think that measuring vertical equity in assessments is relatively straightforward, but it turns out that is not the case. It's particularly challenging because the market value of any given property is unknown. We do have sale price as a proxy for market value, but as we know, sometimes people will overpay for a property. Sometimes there's distress sales where people may get less than the market value. So because of that, it actually makes the measurement of vertical equity a bit of a challenge. Fortunately, we do have detailed guidance from the International Association of Assessing Officers and their standard on sales ratio studies. The IAAO provides two vertical equity measures in its standard, the price-related differential and the coefficient of price-related bias.
The price-related differential is the PRD. This is a vertical equity measurement. It is useful, but it is admittedly somewhat flawed. So on the positive side, it is simple and easy to calculate. However, the results produced from this test can be distorted just from a few high-priced properties, which can lead to a false indication of regressivity. The PRD is a useful indicator, but typically requires more analysis to get a more accurate read on whether or not the assessor is achieving vertical equity. The other common metric in the industry is the coefficient of the price-related bias, or the PRB. So this is arguably a more robust measure that's less susceptible to the influence of these outliers. However, it is much more difficult to calculate than the PRD. And also some academic research has found that regression-based vertical equity measures, such as the PRB, may be prone to indicating that valuations are regressive, even if there is no bias present.
Another measure that is in the standard, it's actually in an appendix, but it's certainly mentioned in the standard, is Spearman's rank. It is a way of evaluating whether low and high price properties are appraised at equal percentages of market value. So therefore, it is a good indicator of whether vertical equity exists. Spearman's measures the strength and direction of the association between two variables. So what we do is we establish ranks for each property in the analysis, one rank for the price, the other rank is for the assessment to sale ratio. And then we perform a correlation analysis of the two ranks. And the coefficient that we get out of that is called Spearman's role. And if we would expect to see if there is vertical equity presence is a very low correlation between those two ranks. So as we can see in the distribution below, that's essentially the case, that as we plot the ranks of the assessment to sale ratio on the y-axis and the sale price rank on the x-axis, there's very little correlation there that is indicated. So while Spearman's does provide some useful information on the vertical equity in the sample, since it is a simple correlation, it lacks some important information on the distribution that some other measures have. And one of those other measures are Gini measures. Now, Gini measures have been around for generations. They're a common measure of inequity that's used in economic analysis, but they've really only recently been considered as a measure of vertical equity in property tax assessments. Gini's also use a ranking of sales and assessments in their calculation, but they can also quantify how the distribution of its assessments behave at different points in the distribution. Gini's also provide us with a statistical measure called the Kekwani Index that provides a measure that summarizes the relationship of the sales and the assessment distributions. And a lot of this analysis was brought to us by Carmela Quintos from the New York City Assessor's Office. And she did a great paper on this in the Journal of Property Tax and Assessment Administration in 2021 that is cited here. So here's an example of what a Gini plot will look like. You'll see that there are two lines here, one representing the assessed values, one representing the sale prices. So the way the Gini's work is if we have a very strong correlation between the assessment and the sale prices, the lines will be very close together, which is what you'll see here. And then we also have our Kekwani index calculated at 0.923. So that's a Kekwani index of 1 indicates perfect vertical equity. So a measure of 9.23 suggests that there's a real strong correlation and that we can feel good about the vertical equity in this distribution. So one of the things that I think we're trying to convey in this presentation and in the app itself is that the notion of having a single or best measure of vertical inequity may be elusive. And instead, the best approach is really to calculate several measures and develop a more complete picture of the vertical equity of the distribution. The IAAO recently had a statistical measures task force that looked at all of the measures that we talked about here and some others as well, and they came to that same conclusion. So that's the approach that we've taken in the app. We provide you not only with all the measures indicated here, the PRD, the PRB, Spearman's rank, and Gini measures, we also provide a decile analysis. So with that, we'll wrap up this portion of the presentation, and in part 2 of our tutorial, we will show you, give a demonstration of how you actually use the app. Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Ron.